Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is November 13th. Well, here in my Minnesota garden, we are inching ever closer to snow in the forecast. It looks like it will be happening next week sometime, and so the likelihood of a white Thanksgiving is looking ever more promising. The garden is getting closer and closer to its winter slumber, and each day, November is offering a special kind of beauty, one that speaks of transition and preparation. There's still time for those final garden tasks that always seem to sneak up on us. Think of things like taking your coleus cuttings. I love coleus. More with each passing year. These tender perennials offer such fantastic foliage throughout the growing season, and now is the moment to ensure their survival for next year through cuttings. And the same goes for those beloved geraniums. A few strategic cuttings now will reward you with free plants come spring. Take one final walk around your garden. It's surprising how many potted plants might be tucked away in forgotten corners, still waiting for their forever home in the ground. I was surprised at myself the other day as I was walking back to my garden shed. What did I find but a flat of sedums that I had never gotten planted? And they were hiding under my willow where I had placed them the other day. And now that all the leaves are off this ornamental willow, there were the sedum, just looking at me, asking to be planted. So those last walkthroughs are invaluable. Just one more time through the garden. Well, I wanted to open today's show with some historical readings before we get to today's botanical history. Now, these were little newspaper clippings that I had put in the folder for this day, and they're wonderful little glimpses of November's past. The first reading is from November 13th in 1833. This was an article that appeared in the Kansas City Times. Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing what appeared to be fireworks from heaven. Well, that's exactly what happened on this day back in 1833. Many thought the world was ending. And I love what they wrote in this article. The meteors seemed to rain down like fiery fruit being shaken from a tree. Well, of course, now we know that those meteors were from the constellation Leo, hence their name, the Leonids. Well, the second reading is from a newspaper article back in 1916, so just over 100 years ago on this day, and it's one of my favorite little newspaper clippings that's garden-related. It makes me smile. This little article was shared in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and there's no title, but it just shares a little story out of Washington, D.C., and the way it started out is what got my attention. If you ever get the idea that people aren't interested in flowers, just give a flower show, said one of the guards at the government Chrysanthemums show last week. After that opening line, I was completely hooked, and then it just made me chuckle because it continues on and it says this. All morning long, this guard had been repeating the words, "Keep to the right," to the massive visitors that were streaming into the greenhouse. You can almost see him there, can't you? Standing there welcoming all these visitors who are excited to see the chrysanthemums. And then the article reports that some of the chrysanthemums had been injured, and this guard was a little bitter about it. He was quoted as saying, "Sometimes people take too much interest in flowers. If you don't watch them, they break them off and take them home as souvenirs." Well, on that day, there were over 250 varieties of chrysanthemums described as a riot of color. And the two types that appeared to be the most popular were a big white chrysanthemum called Queen Mary and then a little lavender pom-pom chrysanthemum that didn't have a name, but it was the one that everyone was asking about. Isn't that sweet? Well, and then the last reading is something very special. This is an anonymous poem about November. In fact, it's called November Garden, and it was published in the Daily Advocate of Greenville, Ohio. And I have looked for this poem high and low. I have never found another copy of it. And it was published under the name Carolina Moon. So I'm afraid we are never going to know who authored this sweet little poem called November Garden. I thought you would enjoy it. The marigolds were still in bloom, despite the summer drought. They saw November ushered in, October mustered out. Their sunny golden crowns above the withered stalks of phlox brought cheer to gardens after frost laid low the 4 o'clocks. Jack Frost, the killer, enemy of flowers of every hue, left only the hardiest of them when making his adieu. The first snow of the season brings a scattering of flakes to warn of wintry weather and the toll it always takes. November Garden. I will put a copy of this poem in the Facebook group for the show, so if you're there, you'll see it. And I also put a copy of it over on my Blue Sky account, @GardenerPodcast. That's my handle there. It's time for today's Botanical History. It was on this day, November 13th in 1849, that a most extraordinary presentation took place at Windsor Castle. Queen Victoria, known for her love of botanical wonders, was about to encounter her magnificent namesake, the Victoria Amazonica. Imagine, if you will, standing in the grand halls of Windsor Castle on that day as Joseph Paxton presented a massive leaf and an exquisite bloom to the Queen. The moment was so moving that Her Majesty enthusiastically declared, "We are immensely pleased." Such a British understatement for what was indeed one of the most remarkable plants ever cultivated in England. Well, the story of this royal water lily reads like a botanical fairy tale. Imagine the scene at Chatsworth, where the brilliant Joseph Paxton created what can only be described as a South American river in miniature. His dedication to replicating the plant's natural habitat, installing a small water wheel to mimic the Amazon's gentle current, speaks to the extraordinary lengths Victorian gardeners would go to nurture their green treasures. Early historical records showed the water lily could grow 647 square inches daily. That's nearly 4.5 square feet of growth in a mere day. The most enchanting chapter of this story unfolds the following week when Paxton orchestrates what must have been a magical moment. Paxton brought his 7-year-old daughter Annie to work with him and then placed her on top of the lily pad in the Victorian pool. Well, there is an illustration of it that appeared in the London News that following week, and you can imagine this caused quite a stir. Well, Paxton would go on to discover the architecture of those lily pads could hold up to 300 pounds, and Paxton comes up with the idea for the Crystal Palace. Today, these magnificent plants continue to captivate visitors at botanical gardens worldwide. As we reflect on this remarkable plant's journey from the Amazon to Windsor Castle and eventually to public gardens worldwide, we're reminded of the extraordinary dedication of Victorian horticulturists like Joseph Paxton. Their passion for pushing the boundaries of what's possible in cultivation has given us the privilege of experiencing these magnificent water lilies today. And it was on this day, November 13th, in 1909, that the Secretary of Agriculture, James Wilson, sent what seemed like a routine notification to the Plant Industry Office in Seattle. Little did anyone know this simple message would set in motion one of the most delicate diplomatic situations in early 20th century American-Japanese relations. The story begins with what was meant to be a generous gift of 300 cherry trees from Tokyo to Washington, D.C. However, Tokyo's mayor, Yukio Ozaki, eager to strengthen international relations, expanded the gift to an astounding 2,000 trees. These weren't just any trees. They were young specimens carefully selected to ensure they would grace the capital's landscape for generations to come. David Fairchild, a renowned botanist, had helped broker this diplomatic gift exchange. Fairchild represented the spirit of botanical exploration, having introduced numerous beloved fruits like avocados, mangoes, and peaches to American soil. Marlatt, haunted by personal tragedy and professional caution, had become America's leading voice for agricultural quarantine. Incidentally, Charles Marlatt was in David Fairchild's wedding, so that gives you an idea of how well these two knew each other. President William Howard Taft ordered a thorough inspection of the trees upon their arrival. When Fairchild and Marlatt examined the shipment together, different perspectives immediately clashed. While Fairchild saw salvageable trees that merely needed pruning, Marlatt discovered his worst fears confirmed: various infestations threatening American agriculture. The situation rapidly escalated to a full-blown crisis. In a public spectacle that many would later regret, the entire shipment was burned as reporters watched and documented the destruction. The incident nearly derailed American-Japanese relations. What was meant to be a beautiful symbol of friendship had turned into a potentially devastating diplomatic incident. Anonymous letters appeared in East Coast newspapers questioning the wisdom and necessity of such a public rejection of Japan's goodwill gesture. This controversy led directly to the Plant Quarantine Law of 1912, which still governs plant importation today. The tale of the cherry trees didn't end with that fateful burning. In a remarkable testament to the resilience of international friendship, Mayor Ozaki and the people of Tokyo sent a second shipment of trees in 1912. These trees, carefully cultivated and meticulously inspected, would become the very same cherished blossoms that now frame the tidal basin and draw millions of visitors to our nation's capital each spring. The friendship that bloomed from this near diplomatic disaster reminds us that sometimes our greatest garden triumphs emerge from what initially appear to be our most devastating setbacks. Today, as we admire these magnificent trees during their annual spring celebration, we're witnessing more than just natural beauty. We're seeing living symbols of perseverance, friendship, and the power of diplomatic grace. This fascinating story of the cherry trees reflects a larger truth about gardening, that every plant in our gardens carries not just beauty, but history, politics, and human drama in its DNA. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Kew Gardener's Guide to Growing Cacti and Succulents by the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew and Paul Rees. This book came out in 2023, and the subtitle is The Art and Science to Grow with Confidence. Well, what makes this book particularly special is the unique blend of Kew Gardens' centuries of expertise with Paul Rees's hands-on experience as the tropical nursery supervisor at the Royal Botanic Gardens. Having worked with the cacti and succulent collection since 2009, Paul brings both scholarly knowledge and practical wisdom to every page. Let me share some fascinating insights from the book. First, a common misconception is cleared up. While all cacti are succulents because they store water, not all succulents are cacti. This distinction helps us understand why different succulents need different care approaches. The book reveals some surprising facts about where these plants naturally grow. Would you believe that succulents don't just thrive in traditional deserts? They can be found in the Atacama Desert, surviving on just 15 millimeters of rain annually. They can be found along coastal cliffs, embracing salty conditions, under nurse plants that protect young specimens, in quartz gravel plains where crystals reflect sunlight, and on cooler mountain slopes. Now, I love all of the plants that are profiled in this book, and if you're like me, you'll be surprised at how many you recognize and how many you've grown firsthand. I particularly love the profile of the ponytail palm, or elephant's foot. Despite its common name, it's not a palm at all. This remarkable plant can grow to 26 feet in ideal conditions, thrives near bright windows, can tolerate extended periods without water, and is sadly threatened in its native Mexico. This book also features 12 practical projects, from creating succulent bonsai to designing living walls. This book is 144 pages of essential wisdom for anyone interested in these architectural plants. You can get a copy of The Kew Gardener's Guide to Growing Cacti and Succulents by the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew and Paul Rees, and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $9. We end today's show with a Botanic Spark from November 13th, 1989. It was on this day that the Sarasota Herald Tribune published a story that lifted the veil on the shadowy world of rare orchid trading. The article focused on Limerick ink and an alleged smuggling operation of endangered Chinese orchids to Florida. But the real story runs much deeper into the heart of orchid obsession. The tale of Kerry Richards and his nursery Limerick ink reads like a botanical thriller. Picture this: perfectly documented Chinese orchids, Paphiopedilums, Cymbidiums, and Dendrobiums arrive in Florida. All seems well until Richards attempts to enter them in a prestigious British show. Suddenly, the legitimacy of every document is questioned, leading to a dramatic confiscation by U.S. Fish and Wildlife officers. But here's where the story takes an ironic twist. The confiscated orchids were supposed to be secured behind locked gates at the Marie Selby Botanic Gardens in order to prevent moonlight raids. But somehow, these orchids ended up being distributed to members of the Botanic Garden, or they were offered for sale, or even sent to other gardens. In a bizarre turn of events, Richards could have legally repurchased his own confiscated plants. This Florida incident highlights a troubling reality. Rescue centers for confiscated orchids aren't always the sanctuaries we imagine. Often, these rare specimens end up dead from neglect, or if they survive, become valuable commodities in complex networks of trades and sales. I must confess my own deep love for orchids. They're my preferred gift of choice over roses, and I've developed my own little trick for enhancing their beauty for the periods between blooms. I hunt for artificial orchid blooms in thrift stores, then I go home and deconstruct them, and then I take the bloom and I artfully stake it among my recovering plants, the ones that are no longer blossoming. And so during that period, when I'm waiting for the next bloom, I still have a permanent bloom that I can enjoy in the meantime. Now, while nothing compares to the real thing, this creates a year-round display in my home conservatory that brings me joy, even in the off-season. As you tend your own gardens this week, whether you're taking those last coleus cuttings, bringing in the dahlias, or perhaps nurturing an orchid on your windowsill, remember that you're part of this grand continuing story of humans and plants. Your garden, no matter its size, is a thread in this beautiful tapestry that connects us all across time, across cultures, and across continents. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you for spending this time with me today, exploring these fascinating stories from our gardening past that help us understand our gardening present. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.